Welcome 9 to 12 friends. Today is part 2 of our lesson this week about narrative art. Lesson 1 focused all about inspiration and looking at what narrative art is. Today you're going to start your drawing for your own piece of narrative art. If you followed all the steps for yesterday's lesson, you should have a sketchbook with a handful of ideas for your piece. I'm going to show you 2 skills that are going to be important to completing your work today. 1, we're going to revisit perspective. Perspective allows us to add depth to our work. It helps to create the feeling that we are in a room. So when we're doing that, I want you to create perspective lines using a vanishing point. I'm going to show you how to do that in a demonstration. And I'm also going to show you how I apply that to my own work by taking a portion of the perspective piece or the perspective demonstration and applying a corner of that into my work. You'll understand what I'm talking about in a moment. The second demonstration you're going to get today is a little review on applying color. We've all talked about using oil pastels before in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, friends. For new 4th graders, this might be a little bit new, which is why I'll just show you some quick examples of how we blend color together. Then you're going to use oil pastels to color your work. It is important that you use the correct materials. Use of oil pastels this week will be a portion of your grade. I don't expect anybody to complete this work and for it to look like, the most famous artist created it. We are all learning and that's okay. But I do expect time and effort to be reflected in the piece that you submit at the end of the week. So if you are unsure about applying oil pastels, play around in your sketchbook. Practice a little bit about your usage before you move forward in coloring your final piece. The supplies you'll need for this assignment are pretty simple. You need 1 piece of your white project paper, you need a pencil, and I'd recommend having an eraser as well, especially for the perspective piece. You'll create some lines for your vanishing point that you won't really want in your final paper. And then you'll need your oil pastels. I would have your sketchbook handy too, especially if you have definitely decided on what you're going to draw for your narrative art piece. Okay, 9 to 12 friends. We're going to talk a little bit about perspective. We talked about it before. You drew a building in a 2-point perspective. Right, we saw our building that tapers off in 2 different directions. We had 2 vanishing points. You need to create some depth within the room that your scene is happening in. And so in order to do that, you're going to look to capture that depth by using a vanishing point and using perspective in your work. I'm going to show you 2 different examples of how to make that happen within your work. This is something you have to do in pencil or it's really not going to work out. I'm going to show you in pencil and then I'm going to further outline it in Sharpie just in case it's not clear. So we talked about a vanishing point. A vanishing point is that far off point in the distance where all of our lines are heading to in one direction. So within our room, our vanishing point is going to be in the middle. Okay, then we need to draw lines as straight as we can. If you have a ruler, you can use it, but this is kind of a sketchy moment in time drawing, so if our lines are not like the most perfectly straight lines in the whole world, that's okay. Remember, we're just kind of doing our best. So, being very sketchy and laying it down is going to help you to get a pretty straight line. Okay, I feel pretty good about that. Okay, so that's my vanishing point in my room. That's where all my lines are headed. The next thing I need to do is I'm going to draw another rectangle within this. And I'm going to do that by connecting points on my line. What I'm looking to do is to create a parallel line with my outside edge. Okay? parallel line with my outside edge. Same thing at the bottom. Again, if you had a ruler, you could do this in a super straight way, and you're welcome to use a ruler for this purpose, but I don't want you to focus on it needing to be super exact too, because chances are you're gonna cover quite a bit of this up. I feel like that was a little uneven, so I'm gonna go back. That's what working in pencil allows me to do. Really feel better. Okay, so this is where I'm gonna outline in a Sharpie just to show you what we actually just created. This looks kind of silly, but I wanna show you what we just created within this room. So, this section here, that's my floor. This is the wall on one side of my room. The wall on the other side of my room. That's my ceiling. Okay, all this stuff here I can kind of erase. I want to leave my vanishing point though, because the vanishing point is also going to help you create depth within the pieces of furniture that you're adding in your room. So let's say I'm going to go ahead and put a couch of some kind in my room. Now I want my lines to follow that same sort of thing. So as I create the outline, again, I'm gonna bring my corners back there. Okay, that's the armrest. So I have my rectangle, which the base of my couch. This will be like the seat part, right? The line that's the back of my room is also kind of the back of my couch. Okay, so let me kind of show you what I did here. So this is the back of my couch, and then that is making it three-dimensional, right? So that's like the back part of the rest there. So I created that armrest. Even that was a line I took towards that vanishing point. And it's put some legs under my couch here. So you see how, again, I'm following those same directions. Everything is like pulling back toward, like a black hole. It's pulling all my lines back towards the back. Let me show you one more piece of furniture. Let's say I have a dresser, right? So I'm just gonna make it facing me entirely. And then I'm gonna do one where it's like on the wall. I'm gonna show you two different ways. Okay, so my dresser is a tall square. Same thing as all my corners are going to go to my vanishing point. And from there then, I'm going to match up the way I did here. I'm going to double up that line. This is what's showing me that third dimension, right? Two-dimensional square, we're making it a three-dimensional object. So we're turning that rectangle into a rectangular prism. And it's showing us. So really, if I kept going, I would show the back part too. But I don't need to show that part for this. I just want to focus on the visible part. Right, so then I can put my drawers or my handles here. I have the top part, so maybe that's where I might first, when we're talking about those extra details, maybe that's, I'm gonna have a vase or something sitting on top to show there's that thing, right? That's the same thing I would do if it was a table. I could shrink it down and it's a table or an end table there. Okay, one more way. So let's say I want one to be sitting on the wall. Okay, so I want to bring it forward. I don't want it to be flush with the floor here. I want it to show that it's taking up space on the floor, not sucked up against the wall. So I'm creating that rectangle. And same sort of thing, I'm going to pull my lines. Okay, so thinking about utilizing this vanishing point as much as possible. I'm happy with the way these things looked, right? But this is my back wall, so maybe my back wall is going to have, maybe there's a window to outside, maybe there's pictures hanging on my back wall. So remember, fill that space. My picture frames on my side walls are going to be maybe a little bit more like trapezoid-y feeling, because they should kind of be heading towards that vanishing point as well. Okay, so consider, how are you creating? Here, I need to fix this. I'm not happy with how I left this. Okay. So this side is the side I want to be visible to my viewer. Okay, make a little bit more sense. Sorry, I didn't finish through all the way. I got excited and moved on. All right, that shows you some basic perspective. So as you're capturing your scene in your house, in a room, utilize perspective to create depth. There's one more way that you can do this, and it's the way that I did in this piece. Okay, if we look, let's look at my piece here. When we look at my piece here, I do have a vanishing point. My vanishing point is kind of off my paper. What I did is I created my back wall, but my back wall is not all fitting in my paper. So this is where I have created a vanishing point off to the side and then determined where my walls come together. So I still have, you see those diagonal lines that are all kind of heading in that direction. I need to fix this one a little bit more because it should be angled a little bit more towards my vanishing point here. Do you see how those lines are still all heading off into the direction of my vanishing point? But my composition isn't showing the entire room. I've decided to zoom in. Let's say I decided to zoom in where my room, I want to focus on the details of what's happening here. Okay, so I'm not going to show the ceiling. I'm not going to show this other side wall. I'm focusing more on my composition being here. Now, it needs to fill my paper, so I'm just going to know that my vanishing point is really over here as I draw my lines off my paper. Okay, I hope that gave you a nice tutorial on just starting to approach perspective within your drawings to create depth within your work. Within your Schoology folder, you'll find another video that is done by another person, and he goes a little bit more into perspective. So if you really enjoyed this, or if you want to hear it in a little bit of a different way, or you want to just rewatch this section, there are some options for you. So I would check out his video. I think it's about 10 minutes long, and it gives a really nice overview of perspective, and again reinforces why it's important within our artwork. Okay, we're going to talk about using oil pastels. You are going to use oil pastels for this assignment. That is a must. Your use of oil pastels will be one of the criteria for grading for this assignment. So I'd like you to start in your sketchbook, grab a page and your oil pastels, and we're just going to practice a little bit of shading. If you have some scrap paper lying around, you could obviously do it on that as well, but don't get into your project paper with your oil pastel usage. So Oil pastels. Oil pastels have a bit of like this wax and oil and pigment to them. They are the closest things that oil paints. Oil paints would have a little bit more liquid in them to make them spreadable. What's great about these are the way that you can use them to blend really well to create new colors. You can also, depending on the amount of pressure that you use and the way that you apply your oil pastels, you can really create some nice texture in your work as well. Let's go ahead and I want you to pick up your yellow and your blue. And we're going to talk about application and we're going to talk about blending. On your application, now you color similar to the way that you would with crayons. I'm doing about a medium pressure, and you can see it's totally filling that space really nicely. I could also do a much lighter pressure. The lighter pressure is going to give that textured appearance. When you're blending your oil pastels, it's about layering back and forth until you get a nice blend. It's not just one on top of the other. You do switch back and forth a little bit to get the good color there. When oil pastels are put over top of each other, they pick up the layer of pigment underneath and it blends it back in. You can see that with the light pressure, how it really blends quickly and easily into that green that yellow and blue make. And with light pressure, I can just go back and forth a handful of times and I will fully cover my space with light pressure blending. I might have to work a little bit harder with a harder pressure, because when you're pressing harder, you see that, like I said, it picks up the layer of pigment underneath and mixes it back in, but it also carries it with it. So in my lighter shading, that wasn't as big of a deal. I was pressing so lightly, but here when I'm pressing harder, as I pick up the blue, I'm really pushing it back down on my paper. And so to even out the blending, I have to work a little bit harder to get the color to do what I want. Or I need to have an extra scrap piece of paper off to the side that I can use to clean off my oil pastel by getting that extra blue residue off of my color. So I want you to play around with some blending techniques. You'll need to blend. You can see you have a good selection of colors here. These are great colors to use as the base of your colors, but you're going to want to blend them to create other shades of colors, right? We do have a nice brown. We're making people, so we have only really 2 skin tones here. And obviously we all know that, you know, we have unlimited variety in skin tone. It's a big spectrum. And so in order to really create a nice skin tone color, we can create this whole spectrum here by using, think about adding orange in, think about adding yellow into your color. Now, white is just going to lighten it up. White's also nice for helping be like that color to blend around, right? I can add some black in here and then go back over top to make a darker brown skin tone color. And then, but also in that, like, I still want a little of the peach to help blend it all together. All right, so within this small area, I have already created a good spectrum of different tones of colors here. Right, so I want you to play around on your paper too. Can you create, I mean, even some reddish tones in here? My skin tone's a little reddish. So I want you to play around with trying to match your own skin tone. I'm blending lots of different skin tone colors. Trying to blend different skin tones is a great way to play with your oil pastels. To practice that blending, because I don't think there's many people that just picking this straight out of the box is going to give you the right tone. But by combining them with other oil pastels that we have available, there is a good combination out there for your skin tone. So I do want you to spend some time practicing. Now, let's talk about actually coloring your piece. There we go. Okay, you can see I kind of already started. So as you're sketching, those sketching lines, you kind of have two choices with them. If you leave them where they are, there is not much color of these oil pastels that's really going to all the way cover it up. Okay, those lines are going to stay there. So you can kind of embrace those lines in the way that Ferrari Shepherd did. But the lines should still be intentional, okay? Really sloppy, out of place lines, you should go ahead and clean up. There is a difference between rushing and scribbling through your work and then the unfinished and raw look that Ferrari Shepherd achieved in his work. Okay, so I do expect your work to still look like it took you some time, like it is intentional. I have been a little bit disappointed by some of the work that's been turned in so far. You all have more time than you've ever had to complete an art assignment. You all have less distraction probably than you normally did in the art room. You are getting lessons on Mondays and Tuesdays, and then you have Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. You have time set aside in your schedule for art, and that's 45, 50 minutes each one of those days. And a lot of the work that I've seen so far is not showing me that you have spent that time in your artwork. Now, some of you are able to complete your assignments in 45 or 50 minutes, and they're neat and they're nice and they meet all the criteria, right? We all work at different paces. But it's also really clear to me that there are a number of you out there turning in work that you really spent 10 or 15 minutes on. Okay, I understand, and at this point, I know the difference between those of you who are really taking your time to do your nicest, neatest work and what work looks like that is the best for you. So that I will get off my soapbox on that, and we'll discuss that a little bit more when we talk about grading. But the point being is that you apply these oil pastels. We're going to apply them in a more of a textural way, that way to, like, you know, indicate a little bit of movement. This is a snapshot, a moment in time. In my piece, it's a picture of me and my daughter, and we are baking, right? So in this picture, we would be stirring in the bowl. So there should be some movement, right? Neither one of us is standing still. So that's why there are quite a bit of those sketch lines there, and I'm going to leave them there, and I'm actually going to play them up as I color them as well. And so I wanted to kind of show you that process and talk to you a little bit about applying the oil pastels into your piece. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start with my shirt here. You do want to work with your oil pastel kind of on an edge. When I apply, I'm kind of coloring like tiny little circles because I want a nice application. I'd like you to think about laying down a nice base coat of your piece, but then going back with other colors and layering up to create some blending and some shading. You can see as I played around with the hair so far has brown and orange in it, but some white is going to help to blend it together, right? I'm gonna bring these lines around. It gives that movement piece, right? And plus, my hair is super messy and out of place all the time. It's a quick, sloppy bun, so bringing that white around is capturing that feeling of my hair there. I'm layering lots of colors here. And I did the same for my skin tone. I took the peach and I went ahead and made that my base for my skin tone. But now I'm going to go back. Right, where are the places where I'm going to try to blend in and make that tone a little bit darker? You can see I'm really lightly right now, very lightly applying the pastel. And I can go back with my peach to blend that in, to just create like a little bit of a darker shade there. You see how that's blending in and darkening that color there. And it's also okay to keep it a little bit raw for the color there as well. So what I said is I wanted to maybe play up some of those Ferrari lines of movement that I'm leaving from my sketch pencil, and I'm going to do that with my black here. Okay, so once you think about, going back in and those sketch lines, making them, if you choose to kind of go in this style of Ferraris, going back in and making them more intentional by amplifying them. So we're not leaving like scribbly looking lines, but by adding that color, see how much more intentional that looks in my art now. So, and those are lines that I'm not really going to look to blend in. I'm going to blend it a little bit into, my apron section. I'm really liking how that looks now. So play around as you color about layering those different tones. Oil pastels are great for creating really fun tonal colors as you layer them together and do some of that color mixing within your paper as you're working. All right, get my bowl here. So the other thing you want to think about are adding some shadows, right? There's going to be a light source somewhere, and then you're going to need to create that shadow as well. So remember, in Impressionism, we looked at how shadows didn't have to be black. Okay, black should not be your go-to for your shadows. So feel free to play around with the shadows that you create. Dark blue is a really great color to use to create shadows, or like darker purples. You can use a dark color and not feel like black is your only option for your shadows. And again, the white is going to help to blend those colors together a bit. All right, I'm really liking how this is looking. You can see, and same with Ferrari, I played a little bit about, when I sketch my figures, shaping the face a little bit with my pencil, breaking it into that quadrant piece. You can see here I kind of have like a little outline of maybe like a sly smile and a nose there. I don't know that I'm going to go back in and change that too much. I may take some darker brown at a later point to add a little bit more shadow into the work, but I'm going to I'm not going to go in and define actual features. Just like I'm sure some of you all are. Drawing features on a face is definitely intimidating to me, especially to do it in a small, defined area like this as I'm drawing my piece. So I have a lot more coloring to do, and I'm excited to continue to work in this way. I don't need to worry totally about filling all this space with color. Really, where I want you to focus about your color in this piece is about the central most figures. So, for instance, in this piece, I am going to fully color in my people here, my table here, probably the things happening back around me. I think I'm going to give some color to my picture frame, and then I might do a little shadow and coloring on the walls here and a few spots on the floor. Ferrari didn't color every single aspect, and I am using him quite a bit as an example. He's the artist I chose to find inspiration from. So I'm not going to fully color in every inch of this, but I am going to go in and better define all of my pencil lines, whether I choose to add color to all of them or just a nicer outline to them. But I'm not expecting that every single inch of this is fully saturated and colored like this, unless that's the direction that you truly want to take your piece. I hope that direction is clear. If you're having questions about that, that would be a great thing to show up in your help sessions with your paper like this and say, all right, Miss Tess, this is where I'm at with my work. Can you help me? So on Wednesdays and Thursdays from 2:55 to 3:45, you're going to join back into the art lesson room. I'm not teaching a lesson, but I'm there for this exact purpose of showing you this and say, Miss Tess, here's where I'm at in my coloring. Help me figure out, you're the artist, you're going to figure out if it feels finished. But sometimes we need help with that, especially if you need help with that about meeting certain criteria of the assignment. I am going to be grading much more strict, right? We are 2 weeks into this quarter, so we are 2 projects out of 8 completed at this point. We are going to be paying more attention to what is being asked of us and are we following through, okay? Okay, 9 to 12 friends, let's review about your project. I want to make sure you know every component that is part of this project. Like we talked about this cheeseburger where I'm going to place an order from you, which I'm going to do now. I'm going to tell you everything that you need to include in this project, right? These are skills that we're practicing. These are best practices for art making. These are demonstrating understanding of vocabulary terms, okay? These are things that are important. These are art process. This is the using of materials and understanding how to use materials. So when I'm giving you components of an art project, they are meeting a goal, okay? These are things we've talked about. These are things that we're practicing. These are skills we're continuing to grow. Demonstrating them within an art project is a more fun way, I think, than just worksheet, worksheet, worksheet. Okay, that's the other alternative. If you want to show perspective, we do perspective worksheets. It's way more fun to do an art project and then make perspective a component of it. So I want you to understand that when I'm asking for different components of your work, that those are meeting some criteria goals for what you should be accomplishing within art this year. So they are all important. So let's talk about the things you have to complete your art assignment for this week to get full credit. Because if you are missing components, it is not like you either turned it in and you get no credit, or you turned it in and you got all the credit. Okay, this is the first week. It'll be grading for a grade, not just completion. It's a big difference. And I think some of you who have been rushing your work are going to see how much of a difference it is if you don't step up to take this seriously this week. So for your assignment, number 1, it is always necessary that you do your nicest, neatest work. Okay, that is always a component of your artwork, is that you take the time to put in the effort. Okay, So that's one thing you'll be graded upon. Number 2 is the use of your materials. For this project, you need to use your project paper and you need to use oil pastels. You're using oil pastels this week in the blending and application of your color. It's something we're learning about and it's something you'll be graded upon. Number 3, you're creating a piece of narrative art. Your art should tell a story, should be a snapshot actually of a story about something that happened to you, something that's gone on in your life. Narrative is you are the narrator. You are the narrator of this work. You are the artist of this work. So it should be a small snapshot from your life. So that means that there needs to be at least one person within this piece. There needs to be some perspective in your work. Okay, we've practiced perspective. This is our second week of playing with perspective. There needs to be perspective shown in your work. And that is by utilizing a vanishing point as you draw to create those diagonal lines that give the appearance of depth. Depth is an important tool that we use in our artwork to make it look more realistic. We don't want to have images and people that look flat on our paper. We want to add some depth. Number 5, you need to have objects that are clearly in the foreground and the background. That's another tool for creating depth within our artwork. It's filling this space at different layers in the space. So as you create a room, as I'm creating my room here, I have my 2 figures are in the foreground. They're the closest to the bottom of my paper, so they're the closest to the front. Behind that, I have a cabinet and a bowl of fruit, and then the wall. So there are layers of things happening. As I'm creating images in the foreground and background, I need to remember that size is important. Objects that are the closest to me in my work should be the largest. Objects that are the furthest away should be smaller and set off to the back. Also, objects that are the closest to you will be the closest to the bottom of your paper, and then they will move a little up your paper as they get further away. Those are great tools to remember as you're organizing the space of your piece. I think that covers everything. So let's go over those one more time. The last component to finishing your grade is completing an artist statement. Sometimes these are optional as you upload in Artsonia, and sometimes they're not. I do have a way for you to email or to text me your work now, and I've shared that number in Schoology in the messages, and I'll certainly share it again. But if you are going to text me or email, you will still need to complete an artist statement. For your artist statement, this is the way of you explaining your work, of giving your viewers an idea about your work. I want you to give it a title. You can create whatever title that you want. I'd like it to be more creative than my narrative art piece. Maybe make reference to something that you're doing. For my piece here, maybe I'm going to name it Baking, or Baking with Tilly, or, Sunday afternoons. That's usually when we would do a lot of our baking. So think about what is the story that you're telling, and what would be a quick, easy title to give us a clue about what's happening in your piece. Within your artist statement, I'd like you to tell me a sentence or two about what's happening in your piece. So for mine would say, during coronavirus, my daughters and I started baking a lot. In this picture, Tilly and I are making our favorite banana nut cream cheesecake muffins, right? That's my artist statement. That's explaining what's happening. 1 or 2 sentences. Then you're going to give me one more sentence and you're going to explain what from lesson day 1 did you find inspirational that you used in your piece? So for mine, as we talked about when I was coloring it, I found a lot of inspiration by the quick brushstrokes of Ferrari Shepherd. So I would say that. In my piece, I found inspiration by the way that Ferrari Shepherd colored and applied paint within his piece. I tried to mimic that technique as I used my oil pastels to color my work. I hope that gives you a good idea. We will do artist statements not for every piece, but for a few. It's important for us to be able to speak about our artwork, to speak about our inspiration, and it's a skill we'll continue to practice throughout art, not just here, but also at your next steps in your junior high and high school years.